Hey there, sleepyheads. If you're here right now, maybe it's late, and your mind just needed a softer place to land. Maybe you're lying in bed scrolling under dim lights, looking for something calm, familiar, maybe even comforting. If so, you're exactly where you should be. Tonight, we're not just talking about SpongeBob. We're going back to a feeling quiet mornings, warm blankets, cartoons playing softly in the background. Back when life felt lighter. So take a breath. Let the day fade. Pull your blanket a little closer. And let's begin. There's something kind of special about SpongeBob that's hard to explain, but somehow easy to feel. Back then, it wasn't just a show. It was a moment in time. After school, you'd be tired in that specific way, where your brain felt overloaded and your feet felt heavy. The backpack would hit the floor with that familiar soft thud, and maybe you'd grab something from the pantry without thinking too much. A pack of chips, some cereal, even cold pizza from yesterday. But that wasn't the strange part yet. The strange part was how everything calmed down once the TV turned on. You might have felt that shift before the room getting a little quieter, the rhythm of your thoughts slowing down. It didn't matter what kind of day it was, because SpongeBob had this way of making life feel lighter than it did a few hours earlier. The colors were bright, but never noisy, and the music sounded almost like something your memory made up. People say you can almost hear distant cars outside when they rewatch old episodes. And maybe that's true. Or maybe it's just the way nostalgia sounds when you listen closely. Back then, Saturday mornings felt like tiny vacations. You'd wake up without an alarm and wander into the living room wrapped in a blanket, like the day had already forgiven you for anything that went wrong before. Nickelodeon would be playing, and it felt like time moved slower on purpose. Something about that moment stayed even after the episodes ended. Maybe the show wasn't trying to teach anything. Maybe it just wanted to keep you company. But that feeling only grew stronger later when life started getting louder. Homework turned into projects, turned into responsibilities. And before you knew it, SpongeBob became less of a cartoon and more of a memory. People still rewatch it at night, especially when they can't sleep. Not for the jokes, but for the sense of safety those episodes quietly carried. The feeling of a world where problems never lasted too long, and friendships were never really questioned. That wasn't where it ended, because the comfort followed people into adulthood, like a soft reminder that happiness doesn't have to be complicated. Some nights the room might be dark, with only the phone screen glowing and the fridge humming softly behind you. It's in moments like that when Bikini Bottom feels surprisingly real. Not a physical place, but a place in the heart, where things feel gentle again. You might have felt something like this before, when the day was long and you didn't know how to unwind. Rewatching those old episodes can feel like finding a childhood blanket tucked away in a box you forgot you owned. Something about that idea stayed as people grew older. SpongeBob didn't change much across the years yet. The way we saw him did. He became proof that kindness doesn't expire, and that joy doesn't always need a reason to exist. Maybe that's why the show still feels like home, even when life is confusing and the world feels crowded. It didn't end there. Something changed quietly afterward, as if the memory kept walking beside you somehow. And just like that, the ocean didn't feel quite as deep anymore. It just felt familiar. There was something quiet running underneath every episode of SpongeBob. Most people remember the jokes or the silly dialogue, but if you listened just a little closer, you'd notice something softer guiding everything along. The background music barely asked for attention. It was like a gentle breeze in the room, moving around without needing to be seen. Tiny ukulele chords, light piano notes, the soft roll of ocean waves in the distance. You might have felt it, even if you didn't fully hear it. But that wasn't the strange part yet. Sometimes, late at night when everything in the house settles down, that music almost seems to echo from somewhere in memory. Not loudly, just like a soft reminder of when life moved at a slower rhythm. You can almost picture the TV screen glowing across the carpet, maybe a bowl of cereal nearby, even though it was past dinner time. The fridge humming softly behind you. Maybe the window was cracked open, letting in the sound of a car driving by now and then. Something about the stillness felt familiar, like Bikini Bottom existed in its own little pocket of time. People who overthink at night often say they re-watch old episodes just to hear the background music again. Not the dialogue, not the plot, just the atmosphere. Kind of like turning on a nightlight for your thoughts. Those ukulele melodies weren't trying to be catchy. They felt more like someone strumming in another room while you slowly drifted off. It didn't end there, though, because those sounds became something more than decoration. They became part of what made Bikini Bottom feel real. The ocean theme wasn't always cheerful either. Sometimes it had a slightly lonely tone to it, like the ocean at dusk. It never felt sad, just thoughtful. You might have felt something similar if you've ever stayed up too late on a school night, finishing homework with your head resting on your arm, while music played softly from your headphones. Back then, even the quiet felt like company. The show understood that silence doesn't have to be empty. It can be warm, too. But that feeling only grew stronger when life got stressful. As people grew older, they didn't always turn SpongeBob on to laugh. They turned it on to breathe. They wanted the music, the gentle sound of safety. That wasn't where it ended, though, because some fans started realizing something. The music often said what the characters couldn't. It filled the spaces between words. When SpongeBob felt sad or Squidward looked tired, the background music spoke for them in its own quiet language. There were moments when the melody changed right after something emotional happened, and it stayed there just a second longer than expected. Those seconds are still remembered by people who didn't even know they were remembering. You might not recall the exact episode, but you remember how it felt. Like someone pressed pause on the world for a moment, so your heart could catch up. The music of Bikini Bottom still stays with a lot of people, even if they don't realize it. Years later, they'll walk into a cafe and hear some soft guitar playing, and a part of them thinks of sponge-shaped houses and blue skies under the sea. Not because the tune is the same, but because the memory of peace is still attached to those sounds. And maybe that's all music really is in the end. A memory that didn't need words. You can listen closely tonight, when the lights are dim and your mind starts wandering. You might not hear it clearly, but something in you remembers the rhythm of Bikini Bottom. Not to bring back the past, just to make the present feel softer. In its own quiet way, that ocean music still plays, even when nobody notices, and somehow it still knows how to help people breathe. Patrick was always the character people laughed at, The goofy one, the slow thinker, the guy who asked questions that didn't make sense, but somehow made the moment better. But sometimes, when you rewatch the show at night with the volume a little lower, something about him feels different. There were moments when the jokes faded, and Patrick just stood quietly, as if he felt things more than he knew how to say them. That wasn't the strange part yet. If you look closely, his silence never felt empty. It felt like the kind of silence you hear when the room is dark and the only light is coming from the TV screen. He seemed to live in his own rhythm, slow but steady, like life moved gently through him. There were episodes when Patrick said something unexpectedly deep, and it almost felt like time paused for a second. Not in a dramatic way, more like a quiet realization that there might be more going on inside him than people noticed. You might have known someone like that growing up. A friend who didn't speak much, but smiled in a way that made things feel okay. Sometimes, the people who are hardest to understand are the ones who carry feelings they don't quite know how to put into words. Patrick had this soft kind of presence, simple, but never cold. He seemed to feel things through experience rather than thought, and maybe that's its own kind of understanding. But that wasn't where it ended. There were moments when he sat on the rocks looking up at the sky like he saw something nobody else could see. There were no explanations, no overthinking, just quiet wonder. And that's the thing about wonder. It doesn't need speed. It just needs space. Patrick moved slowly, but maybe that pace allowed him to notice things faster minds sometimes miss. Some fans say his character reminds them of childhood days that didn't need plans. Sitting outside, staring at clouds, feeling the breeze move across your skin without needing to explain it. Like those summer mornings when time didn't have assignments attached to it. When feelings didn't need descriptions to be real. You can almost hear distant cars outside, and suddenly that simple kind of peace feels familiar again. But that feeling only grew stronger later, when life got noisier and thoughts became harder to manage. For people who overthink, Patrick became strangely comforting. He showed that being quiet didn't mean being empty. Being confused didn't mean being foolish. Sometimes, it just meant your emotions spoke louder than your words. And maybe that was okay. There were rare moments when Patrick asked questions that almost sounded philosophical, even if they were wrapped in silliness. Those were the moments that stayed. They felt like reminders that intelligence isn't a single shape, that hearts experience things brains can't always translate. You might have felt something like this before, in a moment you didn't fully understand, when feelings arrived before language did. Something about that idea stayed, because Patrick was lovable without needing to earn it. He was accepted without explanation. Maybe that's why people see him differently when they grow older. Not as a joke, but as someone who made the world feel safe, just by being gentle inside it. Maybe the show wasn't making fun of him at all. Maybe it was protecting him. And when the scene faded and the music softened, you could almost feel the ocean breathing around him, like the world knew how to comfort those who move at a slower pace. Maybe Patrick didn't need to say much, because his presence already said enough. It didn't end there, though. Something about that quiet understanding might lead somewhere deeper. A question forming slowly beneath the surface, but we'll let that part wait a little longer. The Krusty Krab always felt a little worn in, like a place that had seen the same morning routine for years without ever complaining. The floor had that familiar squeak, as if every step echoed the past. The lights buzzed quietly overhead, tired but still trying. It never looked shiny or brand new, yet somehow it felt steady, like it wasn't going anywhere. That wasn't the strange part yet. For a lot of people, it almost felt like their first job. Not glamorous, not too exciting, just a place where you learned how to show up. Maybe you had an apron, maybe a name tag, maybe you clocked in nervously your first day and hoped you wouldn't mess anything up. The hours felt slow sometimes, and the tasks didn't always make sense. But there was a rhythm to it, a small kind of safety in knowing what came next. You might have felt that same quiet comfort in real life. A diner on the edge of town, a grocery store with faded tiles, even a grandparent's workplace that smelled like paper and old coffee. Those places weren't built to impress anyone, but they told a kind of story just by existing. The Krusty Krab held that same feeling, tucked between cartoon colors and simple jokes. Maybe that's why it connected more deeply than people realized. But that wasn't where it ended. When you rewatch the show as an adult, the stillness of that restaurant hits differently. The long counter, the routine orders, SpongeBob showing up early just because he genuinely wanted to be there. It felt like a part of life that moves too quickly now. The part where doing something well, even something small, felt meaningful enough. Some fans say the Krusty Krab reminded them that work doesn't always need to be glamorous to matter. Even repetitive jobs have their own quiet purpose. When the room is still, and all you can hear is a soft hum in the background, you start to notice how routine can hold your days together. Maybe you've known places like that. Buildings that creaked, chairs that wobbled slightly, tasks that didn't change much from week to week. But strangely, their consistency felt like comfort. You can almost imagine the smell of the fryer in the air, like the scent clung to the walls. The same way certain childhood places linger in your memory, even if you thought you'd forgotten them. Some nights, when the world feels too loud, you might catch yourself missing those simple spaces, without knowing why. The fridge humming softly behind you, streetlights sneaking through half-closed blinds, the kind of silence that reminds you of closing shifts and slow evenings. But that feeling only grew stronger later, as more responsibilities piled up and life shifted into faster motion. Looking back, even boring tasks start to feel meaningful. Maybe that's why the Krusty Krab never looked updated. It represented something older, steadier, a reminder that not everything needs to evolve to stay important. Routine became a quiet companion. Sometimes, SpongeBob would work with this joy that didn't make logical sense, but it didn't need to. There was a kind of magic in watching someone care that deeply about ordinary things. It made the restaurant feel more like a heartbeat than a business, a place where the day had shape and purpose, even if the world outside felt confusing. Maybe that's what made it special. The Krusty Krab wasn't just a restaurant. It was a moment in time, a slow corner of life where routine became its own kind of comfort. And even though it didn't shout for attention, it stayed with people in a soft, almost hidden way. Something changed quietly afterward. Routine stopped being boring and started feeling like home. SpongeBob always tried, even when he didn't have to. He woke up ready, like every day mattered, even if nothing special was going on. There was something honest about the way he did things. Simple, but real. He didn't chase recognition. He just cared, quietly, without asking anything in return. That wasn't the strange part yet. When you're older, and you rewatch the show, his effort hits a little differently. It almost feels like he was carrying something invisible. The way he kept showing up, even when nobody noticed. You might have felt something like that too. A moment when you tried hard, but your voice barely made a sound. Not failure, just silence. Yet somehow, he still smiled through it. There's a certain kind of strength that doesn't show off. The kind that lives in small routines, punching in on time, helping others when it would have been easier not to. It's the effort that doesn't get applause, but still matters. A lot of people relate to that, especially when the world starts to feel heavy. They turn on the show not just to laugh, but to breathe. Not to escape, but to remember that trying has value, even when it feels unseen. Sometimes you can almost feel it through the screen. The soft background music, the echo of kitchen sounds, the ocean stretching quietly outside the window. SpongeBob would keep moving with that same gentle energy, like his heart knew something his mind didn't say aloud, even when Squidward brushed him off, even when Patrick didn't fully understand him, even when Mr. Krabs focused on money more than people. SpongeBob still cared. But that wasn't where it ended. The more you think about it, the more it starts feeling like he represented something bigger. A kind of hope most people lose when life gets complicated. His effort didn't come from ambition. It came from love. Love for his work, for his town, for the simple rhythm of each day. Even when he failed, he tried again with the same brightness, as if disappointment was just a passing cloud rather than a permanent sky. You might remember times in your own life when trying felt lonely, when the homework piled up, when your first job left you exhausted, when you stayed up too late finishing something that no one else would ever really notice. Maybe you sensed the weight in your chest, or heard the fridge humming behind you, while the rest of the house fell asleep. Those are the moments when people relate to SpongeBob most. The quiet nights, when effort doesn't have witnesses. Something about that truth stayed. His character didn't grow bitter. He didn't turn silent. He just kept giving what he had, even if it wasn't perfect. And maybe that's why so many people hold on to the show years later. Not because they expect a plot twist, but because they need a reminder of what the trying means when words run out. Deep down, it begins to feel like SpongeBob was showing how to carry hope without making noise, how to care without needing validation, how to keep going, even when your voice feels small. That quiet kind of strength isn't always praised, but it lingers inside people who notice it. It lives in memories like a small light that refuses to go out. And just like that, something about the theory starts to grow softly in the background. That maybe SpongeBob wasn't just the happy character. Maybe he represented the feeling of effort, that quiet pulse that keeps people moving, even when the world barely sees them. It didn't end there, though. Something deeper might be waiting beneath the surface, like a tide slowly rising. But we'll let that part unfold when the time feels right. There's a quiet idea that slips in when you rewatch SpongeBob late at night. The kind of idea that doesn't jump out, but slowly appears when the room is calm and your thoughts are moving gently. What if SpongeBob wasn't actually the main character at all? It sounds strange at first, but the show didn't always orbit around him. So many episodes centered around someone else's pain or longing. That wasn't the strange part yet. Take Squidward, for instance. His loneliness didn't just decorate the story. Sometimes it was the story. You could feel the tiredness in his voice, even through the jokes. Sometimes the camera lingered on him, standing alone in his house, the clarinet resting quietly by his side, as if the show was silently asking us to notice something deeper. SpongeBob wasn't fixing him. He was simply present, like a steady pulse the world kept forgetting to thank. The same thing happened with Patrick. The show explored confusion and identity through him. Mr. Krabs had his fear of losing everything. Sandy struggled with belonging. Plankton dealt with feeling small in a world that never really saw him. Yet in so many of those stories, SpongeBob brushed through like soft sunlight. Not the storm, not the spotlight, just the light that helped make everything more visible. You might have known someone like that in real life. A friend who didn't demand attention but somehow kept everyone connected. They were never the loudest person in the room, yet they made the room feel full. Someone who remembered your birthday, or asked how you were doing when nobody else noticed. They didn't fix every problem, but their presence made the struggle easier to carry. Maybe that was SpongeBob all along, kind of like a heartbeat in the background, not always noticed, yet always there. That feeling only grows stronger when you watch the show alone at night. The sounds around you soften. The fridge hums quietly behind you. The streetlights outside flicker through the blinds. And somewhere in that quiet space, you start to feel the show differently. Bikini Bottom becomes more than characters. It becomes a little town full of hearts doing their best to keep going. But that wasn't where it ended. The subtle part is this. SpongeBob rarely changed. His personality stayed steady across years. Yet everyone around him grew, struggled, failed, and learned. Almost like he existed as a constant, something reliable in a world that kept shifting. Like a symbol of hope that didn't need to evolve to stay important. Maybe that's why fans return to him when life gets confusing. Not because he grows, but because he stays. When people feel anxious, uncertain, or lost, they don't always seek answers. Sometimes, they just want warmth, something familiar. SpongeBob might have been that warmth, visiting each character's life like a quiet lantern, not to provide wisdom, just to show things were still bright enough to be seen. You might have felt that someone kept you going once. A brief conversation, a laugh during a hard day, a memory that makes you smile when the night gets heavy. Maybe the show mirrored how one kind heart can hold a community together without anyone realizing it. A theory drifting beneath the surface, like an ocean current moving things gently without ever showing itself. And just like that, watching SpongeBob becomes less about comedy and more about connection. It wasn't always telling a story. It was quietly asking us to feel something, warning us not to overlook the light that moves between people. It didn't end there, though. That feeling leads somewhere deeper, as if the town of Bikini Bottom was holding a secret we never fully heard. But maybe we're just starting to listen. Squidward always seemed annoyed, but maybe he was just tired. When you watch the show as a kid, he feels like the grumpy neighbor. But rewatching it as an adult reveals something softer underneath, an ache that doesn't speak very loudly, but never fully goes away. That wasn't the strange part yet. His house was always quiet. Too quiet. The walls looked bare, the lights felt dim, and the clarinet leaned against the corner like it had already given up. You can almost picture that room at night. The low hum of appliances, the shadows stretching across the floor, the silence that doesn't wait for permission. Maybe that's why his character starts to feel so human when you grow older. It echoes the moment you realize that chasing a dream doesn't always mean it will chase you back. There's something painfully real about his attempts to create beauty in a world that doesn't applaud it. His art shows fail. His clarinet recitals barely get an audience. The people around him don't seem to care. And yet, he keeps trying. Not loudly, not proudly. Just enough to prove to himself that he hasn't given up completely. Maybe you've felt something like that before. The effort that happens when nobody's watching. Staying up too late with headphones on. Trying to create something that feels like purpose. You might have known someone like Squidward. Or maybe you've been him. Wanting to be understood, but not wanting to ask for attention. Growing older without a guidebook. Realizing that maturity is less about confidence and more about learning how to carry confusion. Some people say he wasn't angry at all. Maybe he was lonely. A kind of quiet loneliness. The kind that doesn't shout, but waits. But that wasn't where it ended. When SpongeBob walked into his life, Squidward didn't instantly feel better. That's not how real life works. Instead, SpongeBob was simply present, a burst of color in a muted world. An interruption that bothered Squidward, but also kept him from sinking deeper. It's almost as if SpongeBob didn't come to fix Squidward. He came to keep Squidward from disappearing. Adults who rewatch the show often say SpongeBob represents the part of them that refuses to let go of joy. The reminder that life can still be silly, even if it doesn't make sense. That maybe happiness isn't a reward we earn, but a visitor that arrives unexpectedly. Sometimes, that kind of joy doesn't stay long, but maybe that's okay. Some feelings only need a moment to remind us they still exist. There's a scene people remember, a long sigh from Squidward as he closes his door for the night. Nothing dramatic happens, but the silence feels heavy, almost like the world paused. You can picture the fridge humming behind him, the soft glow from the hallway light, the kind of evening where it's just you and your thoughts, and the noise outside the window slowly fades into nothing. Some nights, that stillness feels less like peace and more like loneliness wearing a quiet mask. But something changes when SpongeBob appears. Not because Squidward suddenly becomes joyful, but because his world becomes noticed. SpongeBob never gives up on him, never stops knocking on his door, never stops believing there's still a spark inside him. And maybe that's the real message, that some people don't need saving. They just need someone to remind them that the world still sees them. Growing up doesn't mean everything makes sense. Dreams don't always bloom. But sometimes, life gives us little anchors, unexpected people, quiet moments, a memory that warms the night. It didn't end there, though. The theory of Squidward's character still lingers. waiting quietly for its next note to be played. Sandy was always different, and the show never tried to hide it. A land creature in an ocean world. Smart, strong, brave, but always a little out of place. Even when she walked confidently, there was a quiet tension beneath her steps. The kind you feel when you know you don't fully belong, but you still choose to show up. That wasn't the strange part yet. Her dome was more than a home. It felt like a shield. Walls she had to build just to breathe. Some people know that feeling too well, creating a bubble around themselves when the world feels unfamiliar. Changing schools, moving to new states, sitting alone at lunch tables where everyone speaks a different rhythm. You can almost picture Sandy working late inside that dome, the air machines buzzing softly, echoing the feeling of being safe, but separate. There were moments when the show captured loneliness without using any words. Sandy stepping outside in her gear, trying to fit into a world that didn't quite fit her. She never complained, but her spaces felt carefully constructed, organized, controlled, a little too perfect. Like she knew that letting things get messy could make everything collapse. You might have felt something like that before, needing structure just to stay grounded. But that wasn't where it ended. Even when she felt out of place, Sandy still showed up for her friends. She trained them, helped them, watched over them. That's the part that sticks. She didn't let being different become a reason to disappear. Instead, she quietly turned her difference into strength. She was the one character who didn't rely on Bikini Bottom to define her. She brought her own identity with her, even when the world around her didn't fully understand it. People who've moved around or felt like outsiders often see themselves in Sandy. They might remember walking into rooms where everyone already knew each other, the silent pressure to adapt, the feeling of studying people, just to figure out how to speak their unspoken language. But sometimes, Sandy made it look possible to belong without giving up who you are. Maybe that's why she always stood out. Not just because she was different, but because she stayed different. There's a scene people recall where she sings about missing Texas. Simple song, but full of heart. The kind of longing that settles into your chest if you've ever been far from something familiar. You might hear it at night, when the world around you feels foreign, and the streetlights paint unfamiliar shapes on your walls. That soft ache of missing a place that used to make sense. But Sandy's story didn't end in loneliness. She laughed with friends. She fought battles. She played music and joined adventures. She found ways to belong without shrinking herself. Maybe that's what makes her character so quietly powerful. She didn't need to fit in to be loved. She just needed to be present. You might have known someone like that. Maybe you were someone like that. Someone who felt out of place, but kept going anyway. Someone who built their own space, but left the door open. The kind of person who shows that being different doesn't have to be isolating. It can be a bridge, too. In that way, Sandy wasn't just a character. She was a reminder that feeling like an outsider doesn't erase your place in the world. That even when everything feels strange, connection is still possible. Maybe being different doesn't mean being alone. Maybe it just means your story is waiting for the right place to grow. And just like that, the water around Bikini Bottom seems wider and somehow a little more welcoming. Plankton wanted success so badly that it almost broke him. Not physically, but quietly, deep in the places most people never see. On the surface, he looked like a villain, always plotting and scheming. But if you listened closely, there was something else behind it. Not evil, just fear. That wasn't the strange part yet. He chased the secret formula, the way some people chase approval. Like if he could just get it, the world would finally recognize he mattered. His voice always carried a hint of desperation, like someone talking louder, just to make sure they're heard. Some people know that feeling all too well. The long nights pushing yourself, trying to prove something to a world that doesn't seem to care. You can almost hear the computer whirring beside him, like the hum of an empty apartment at night. He wasn't trying to destroy Bikini Bottom. He was trying not to disappear. And that's a different kind of battle, one that doesn't show up in the dialogue, but lingers beneath the jokes. His failures weren't just funny moments. They were reflections of the anxiety that exists when your dreams stay just out of reach. Maybe you've felt that moment too, staring at a goal that seemed close enough to see, but too far to touch. But that wasn't where it ended. He kept trying, again and again, a quiet echo of real life. Late-night work, coffee gone cold, hope stretched thin but still alive. His persistence wasn't about winning. It was about surviving emotionally. A way of whispering, I still exist, even when the world didn't answer back. It makes you think Plankton wasn't selfish at all. He was starving for validation. Some people say he represents the fear of being small forever, the fear that effort won't be enough. So he creates plans, builds machines, gathers strategies, like armor against insecurity. But behind all that noise lives a small voice asking to be seen. You might have felt something like this before, tracing over your own goals in your head, hoping that one day they'll notice you. He lived in the shadow of the Krusty Krab, watching everyone else succeed. That kind of proximity to success can hurt more than failure. It's like staring through a window at something familiar, but unreachable. Sometimes, he'd walk alone across the street to his empty restaurant, the silence pressing against him like a weight. You could almost hear the distant cars outside and feel the air grow cold, reminding him that the world doesn't wait for those who fall behind. But the show never made him truly win. And maybe that says something. Maybe the story wasn't about the formula at all. Maybe it was about the emotional cost of chasing something you believe will fix every broken part of you. The truth is success can't heal loneliness. Validation can't undo years of feeling insignificant. What Plankton wanted wasn't grease or money. He wanted to matter. That feeling only grows stronger when you're older. You start realizing life isn't just about achievement. It's about connection. And maybe that's what kept Plankton from winning. The show wasn't punishing him. It was protecting him, because victory wouldn't give him what he truly needed. In the end, Plankton wasn't the villain. He was the voice of ambition mixed with fear, the dreamer who didn't know how to rest, someone who tried over and over, even when nobody believed in him. And maybe that's why he still lingers in people's minds. Not as a threat, but as a reminder of how hard it is to chase dreams alone. There might be something more to learn from him, something deeper the show quietly tucked away. But maybe we'll save that for the next tide. When you look at every character in Bikini Bottom, Squidward, Patrick, Sandy, Plankton, even Mr. Krabs, They all share something quietly in common. SpongeBob always found a way to show up for them. Not with answers, not with logic, but with presence. His laughter walked into every room like a lantern. Not to fix things, just to make things easier to see. That wasn't the strange part yet. SpongeBob didn't need a reason to be joyful. He didn't wait for permission to be hopeful. There was a freedom in the way he lived. Like his heart didn't follow the same gravity everyone else seemed to carry. He never asked if his efforts were appreciated. He just kept caring like it was as natural as breathing. Some people might call that naive, but maybe it was something stronger than that. Maybe it was courage. Think about how he moved between characters. Squidward's bitterness softened around him, even if just a little. Patrick's confusion didn't feel heavy when SpongeBob was near. Sandy trusted him enough to let her guard down. Even Plankton felt seen by him, if only for a moment. It felt less like SpongeBob was the center of the show, and more like he was its rhythm, the heartbeat of a town that didn't always know how to express its feelings. You might have known someone like that. A person whose presence made rooms feel safer. Someone who showed up when things were messy, not because they had advice, but because they believed being there mattered. Maybe they sat with you in silence. Maybe they made you laugh when life felt heavy. Maybe they were simply proof that kindness can exist even when logic says it shouldn't. But that wasn't where it ended. SpongeBob's strength wasn't in intelligence or bravery. It was in continuity. He kept showing up, again and again. Job shifts, failed attempts, misunderstandings, awkward moments. It didn't matter. He tried, and he kept trying with light still in his voice. Some viewers say that's the quiet magic of the show, that persistence doesn't always need applause to matter. Sometimes, when people rewatch episodes late at night, they feel something unspoken. Like SpongeBob wasn't just a main character. He was the emotional thread, stitching everything together. The bright yellow reminder that life doesn't have to be perfect to still hold possibility. Even the tired heart deserves a chance to see color. You might almost hear the soft underwater music while remembering this, a gentle ukulele strumming like a heartbeat, the distant echo of waves hitting the shore of a cartoon world that somehow felt more real than real life. SpongeBob didn't force anything. He simply existed with optimism, showing that joy could live beside struggle, not just after it. And maybe that's why characters leaned toward him, even when they pretended not to. Not because he solved their problems, but because he reminded them that problems don't have to steal every ounce of light. His purpose wasn't guidance. It was presence. His gift wasn't answers. It was hope. Some people believe that's the real meaning of the show. Not that SpongeBob was the main character, but that he was the town's heartbeat, the pulse that kept Bikini Bottom alive, even when its people felt tired or unseen. The reminder that life, even when strange or quiet or lonely, can still hold color. It didn't end there, though. A bigger idea might be waiting just beyond the tide, something that ties every character together in a way we haven't fully noticed yet. Maybe SpongeBob wasn't just keeping the town together. Maybe he was showing us something about ourselves, something still floating beneath the surface. And maybe it's closer than we think. When people think about Mr. Krabs, they usually think about greed, money signs in his eyes, passwords made of dollar amounts, pockets jingling with every step. But when the jokes fade, and the room gets quiet. There's something deeper beneath his character. A kind of fear, like he was building a fortress out of dollar bills just to keep something painful outside. That wasn't the strange part yet. Sometimes his obsession with money didn't feel like greed at all. It felt like armor, like he was guarding something he lost a long time ago and didn't know how to recover. In real life, people know that feeling well. The weight of bills taped to the fridge, the quiet panic when gas prices rise, the way your heart sinks when you check your bank account at the wrong time of day. Money doesn't always represent greed. Sometimes it represents protection. There's a different tone to Mr. Krabs when you watch as an adult. His voice sounds less greedy and more strained. His eyes look tired beneath the laughter. You can almost imagine him sitting alone in his office after closing, the restaurant empty, the soft hum of old lights filling the silence around him, maybe a coffee cup beside him, long since gone cold. Maybe he's counting cash not out of excitement, but out of fear. Fear of what happens if it runs out. That feeling only grows stronger when you consider how often he mentions the past. Something about his history feels heavy, like he remembers a version of life that wasn't secure. Maybe he lost something he couldn't get back. Maybe he decided never to let that happen again. You might have felt something like that too. A choice to protect yourself, even if it means carrying a little too much weight. But that wasn't where it ended. The Krusty Krab felt like more than a business, like a final attempt to hold on to security. A restaurant built out of routine and repetition, fry cooks coming in on time, customers knowing their orders, a cash register staying full, even if everything else felt uncertain. In a strange way, the Krusty Krab might have been his heartbeat, the place where control still existed, the place where the world felt manageable. A lot of adults understand that feeling, working hard, not always because they want more, but because they're afraid of having less, putting money aside, just in case, stretching paychecks, staying in jobs that feel safe, even if they also feel draining. It's a quiet kind of anxiety. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and it never truly sleeps. Sometimes, you can almost picture Mr. Krabs, sitting in silence with the store lights turned off, hearing the faint echo of the fryer cooling down. The night outside feeling too big, the pressure inside feeling too real. That's when you start to notice that money wasn't his joy. It was his shield. But even shields get heavy. There were rare moments when SpongeBob reminded him that life could still be bright. Not perfect, not painless, just bright enough to notice. SpongeBob never cared about money. He cared about effort, about showing up, about loving things just because they existed. And maybe Mr. Krabs needed that reminder, because joy doesn't always have to be earned. Some viewers believe Mr. Krabs wasn't truly greedy at heart. He was just afraid of losing what he'd built, afraid of history repeating itself, afraid that without safety, he'd never feel whole again. And maybe that fear lived in more hearts than people want to admit. It doesn't end there, though, because fear, even when buried, still shapes the world around us. Maybe that's what the Krusty Krab stood for. Not just a restaurant, but one man's attempt to feel safe in a world that once left him behind. And somewhere beneath that ticking cash register, a human heart was still beating. Gary never said much, but he never had to. He existed in that quiet space between thoughts, like the soft hum of life, happening in the background. A steady presence walking gently through SpongeBob's world. Some people overlook him, but those who watch closely see the unspoken comfort he carried. That wasn't the strange part yet. Every day, SpongeBob came home to someone waiting for him. No judgment, no questions, just eyes that recognized him. A simple meow that meant more than words could. People who have pets often understand that kind of connection. The one that doesn't shout, doesn't demand, but feels like a warm blanket laid over the heart. It's the feeling that even when the day is confusing, at least one living soul is glad you're there. Sometimes, when the house feels too quiet at night, you can almost sense Gary's presence the same way people sense their pets nearby. The fridge humming softly, a faint glow from the hallway light, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. That kind of companionship can't really be measured. It's not loud or dramatic. It's just real. And maybe that's what makes it important, because life often moves faster than feelings can keep up with. Days get busy, people get tired, schedules fill up before emotions can find space to breathe. But Gary represented something else, a reminder that love doesn't have to be big to matter. Sometimes it's as small as footsteps padding across the floor while you're thinking about something heavier than you'd like to admit. That feeling only grows stronger as people grow older. Those who live alone or spend long hours in quiet rooms often say companionship becomes less about words and more about presence. The quiet loyalty of a pet can feel like proof that connection doesn't always need to be earned. Sometimes it just exists, like a heartbeat. Simple, constant, gentle. Even the way Gary looked at SpongeBob told a story. Not dramatic, not complicated, just steady. He never tried to change SpongeBob. He never expected anything from him. He simply accepted him. In a world full of expectations, that kind of acceptance feels rare, a form of love people might not even realize they're missing until it's gone. But that wasn't where it ended. Gary also kept SpongeBob grounded. No matter how wild the day was, or how chaotic Bikini Bottom felt, coming home meant returning to something honest, a stable heartbeat in the middle of an unpredictable life. Like the way a familiar melody playing in another room can ease a restless mind. You might have felt something like that before. A quiet evening when nothing happened, yet everything felt okay. Some viewers believe Gary represents a truth many adults come to understand, that love doesn't always arrive with big declarations. Sometimes it's a soft purr, a shared space, a silent understanding that you're not alone. When life becomes louder and faster, those gentle forms of connection become even more valuable. They turn everyday spaces into something like home. You can almost picture SpongeBob sitting on his couch after work, the TV casting a soft light across the room, while Gary curls up beside him. No explanations needed. Just a moment that feels right. People say those are the memories that stay long after the episodes end. Maybe Gary wasn't just a pet. Maybe he was a reminder that love can be small and still feel complete. That loyalty doesn't need language. That being seen doesn't always require being understood. It didn't end there, though. In Bikini Bottom, even the quietest characters seem to carry meaning beneath the surface, and Gary's presence might hint at something even deeper, something quietly waiting to be noticed. some people start to realize something unexpected when they rewatch SpongeBob as adults. Squidward might actually be the most human character in the whole show. As kids, we thought he was just grumpy or rude, but with time, his silence starts sounding different. Not angry, just tired. That wasn't the strange part yet. Squidward felt disappointment like so many grown-ups do. He had dreams that didn't quite take off, a talent he wanted the world to notice, a creative spark that didn't always know where to go. But every morning he still got up, still went to work, still tried. That quiet persistence is something a lot of adults understand more deeply than younger versions of themselves could. You can almost picture him at night, sitting in his dim room, clarinet resting beside him, the soft hum of the fridge in the background, maybe a bowl of leftovers waiting on the table. Everything still, everything slow. The kind of evening where nothing went wrong, but nothing changed either. That kind of stillness can feel heavier than chaos sometimes, when the dreams stay silent and the world doesn't seem to be listening. But that wasn't where it ended. Squidward's bitterness was never loud. It was quiet frustration, the kind that forms when effort meets silence too many times. A familiar feeling for anyone who keeps trying while wondering if it even matters. And yet, in his own way, he still kept going. Maybe not joyfully, maybe not with hope, but with endurance. And sometimes, that's its own kind of bravery. Older viewers began to see that Squidward didn't hate happiness. He just didn't know how to reach it anymore. It's easy to let disappointment turn into distance. To start believing joy is something other people get to have. Rewatching the show makes it clear. Squidward wasn't resentful of fun. He just forgot how to find it. You might have felt something like that before, when childhood optimism slips away, and adulthood takes its place quietly without warning. And then there was SpongeBob. Always cheerful, always bright. Most shows would have made him the cure. But maybe he wasn't meant to fix Squidward. Maybe he was just the reminder that happiness doesn't always need a clear reason to exist. SpongeBob never demanded Squidward's smile. He just kept showing up. A soft invitation rather than a solution. Sometimes optimism doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just needs to be present, like a bright yellow color in the corner of your day. Over time, that presence can soften even the heaviest routines. Maybe Squidward didn't change much, but maybe the world around him felt less sharp, because SpongeBob was somewhere nearby, reminding him that even tired hearts still deserve moments of color. You can imagine Squidward waking up early, staring out his window, SpongeBob's pineapple glowing happily next door, completely unbothered by yesterday's problems. Maybe that is what kept Squidward going. Not hope, but proof that hope still existed somewhere nearby, even if it didn't belong to him yet. Some fans think Squidward might actually represent the moment adulthood becomes real, the moment when dreams slow down, routines settle in, and you feel the quiet weight of responsibility. But maybe his story isn't about giving up. Maybe it's about learning that life can still hold little pieces of color, even if the bigger picture feels unfinished. It didn't end there, though. Squidward's depth might be pointing toward something bigger, a hidden layer inside Bikini Bottom that explains why every character feels so familiar, something waiting to be uncovered, if we're willing to look gently enough. There were a few scenes when Bikini Bottom appeared at night, and something about them always felt different. The colors softened, the ocean water turned darker, like it was holding its breath. The streets felt still, as if the town itself was winding down after a long day. Even the music quieted into something lighter, almost like it was whispering to anyone still awake. That wasn't the strange part yet. Those nighttime scenes didn't try to be funny. They didn't even try to be emotional. They just existed, slowly. You could imagine a faint breeze moving through the empty streets, and the lights from different houses glowing gently in the distance. It reminded some viewers of nights when the TV stayed on after everyone else went to bed, casting soft colors across the room, while the rest of the world settled into silence. You might have known that feeling, lying under blankets, hearing the AC kick on in the hallway, the fridge humming on its own schedule. Maybe the sound of a car passing by made you feel a little less alone. There was no dialogue needed, no big message, just the quiet weight of nighttime, the kind that rests over everything equally. But that wasn't where it ended. The way Bikini Bottom looked at night made the characters feel more real. Squidward's house looked lonelier. SpongeBob's pineapple glowed slightly warmer. Patrick's rock seemed less like a joke and more like an island. Even the Krusty Krab, usually full of noise and movement, felt like it had secrets tucked inside its walls after dark. Night has a way of changing places without actually transforming them, just lighting them differently. Those scenes weren't made to push the plot forward. They were made to let the day breathe out. The audience didn't have to think. They just had to notice. And in that stillness, something familiar rose up. Memories of nights when your brain wouldn't stop turning, even as your body felt tired. Nights when everything in the house slowed down, except your thoughts. Some people say Bikini Bottom at night reminds them of their hometown streets after curfew. Streetlights flickering, the distant sound of a train maybe, or someone closing a car door a few blocks away. Those moments didn't feel empty. They felt open, like the world had grown softer and more forgiving for just a little while. A feeling hard to explain when the sun is up. You might have sat on the couch with the TV quietly running in the background, remote laying beside you, thinking about things without meaning to. Those are the moments when overthinking doesn't feel overwhelming. It just floats, like a jellyfish drifting through water. That same atmosphere was hidden beneath the waves of Bikini Bottom, a sleepy tone that whispered rather than spoke. What made those scenes special was how they gently suggested that silence doesn't have to feel lonely. It can simply be silence, a space where thoughts can rest. Maybe that's what the creators understood. Cartoons don't always need to be loud. They can be companions, soft ones, the kind that let you feel things without asking you to explain them. Watching those quiet nights in Bikini Bottom felt like watching a memory. Not a specific one, but a feeling that lived between memories. The calm before sleep, the pause before dreams, the sort of moment that reminds you that life doesn't always need noise to feel alive. It didn't end there, though. Those nighttime scenes were slowly pointing towards something bigger, something hidden beneath the calm waters. A truth about silence, about company, about the way even simple places carry emotions when the world grows quiet. And maybe that's when Bikini Bottom felt most real. SpongeBob never really changed much. His house stayed the same. His job stayed the same. The alarm rang each morning, and he jumped out of bed like the day had already promised joy. He didn't chase success or try to prove anything. He woke up ready to live, not achieve. That wasn't the strange part yet. As kids, we saw that as silliness. As adults, we start to see something else. Maybe even something important. SpongeBob represented the kind of innocence people try to protect when life gets complicated. The part of us that still wants to wake up excited for no particular reason. The part that isn't rushing to become something, just happy to be something. In a world that constantly pushes growth, change, and achievement, SpongeBob stayed steady. His enthusiasm didn't fade. His curiosity didn't shrink. Even his job at the Krusty Krab never became tiresome to him. He approached it with a kind of love that made the ordinary seem meaningful. Some adults quietly admit they miss days like that. Days when making plans wasn't necessary. When joy didn't depend on a checklist. You might have felt that too. The warmth of childhood mornings before alarms and calendars began defining life. When summer break felt endless. When cereal tasted better in front of Saturday cartoons. When friends came over just to exist in the same room. It was a time before pressure, before performance. SpongeBob lived there. He stayed there. But that wasn't where it ended. The show subtly reminded viewers that growing up doesn't always need to mean changing who you are. Sometimes maturity is less about letting go and more about holding on to what still feels true. SpongeBob never worked towards status or approval. He simply cared about people, about his work, about every moment that passed through his hands. That quiet dedication feels different watching as an adult. It speaks to the part of us that gets tired, the part that worries about falling behind, the part that fears joy might fade if it isn't earned. But SpongeBob never asked life to justify happiness. He simply greeted it, whenever it came. You can almost imagine him flipping Krabby Patties while humming to himself, the kitchen filled with the soft sizzle of oil and the sound of faint ukulele music drifting through the speakers. Routine didn't dull him. It grounded him. His heart didn't grow quieter over time. Maybe it just grew deeper. Some people think SpongeBob is unrealistic, too cheerful, too hopeful. But maybe he was never meant to be realistic. Maybe he was meant to be protective of the gentle spark inside every person who fears losing it. The one that hides behind responsibility, long days, and silent worries. The one that still remembers laughing until the lights flickered at a friend's sleepover. The beauty of SpongeBob's character is that he never became hardened. The world didn't wear him down. It shaped him, but it didn't change him. And maybe that's why so many adults return to the show late at night. Not for nostalgia alone, but for reassurance. That joy can survive growing up. That hope doesn't have to be loud to be real. It didn't end there, though. Because once you notice this about SpongeBob, the whole town starts to look different. The theory begins to widen, as if maybe Bikini Bottom wasn't built to show the chaos of life. Maybe it was built to show how innocence and heart can exist alongside it, not erased by time, but carried through it. And maybe that's the part we were meant to remember. In SpongeBob, the ocean was always there. quiet, endless, blue in a way that didn't need to explain itself. It stretched beyond every frame, like a soft reminder of how big everything really is. The show didn't speak about it directly, but its presence was almost spiritual, always surrounding the town, always listening. That wasn't the strange part yet. When people rewatch the show late at night, that ocean begins to feel different. Somebody once said it reminds them of thinking about life, when the room is dark and the thoughts come uninvited. You might know that feeling, the kind that washes over you when everything slows down, and suddenly the world feels too big to fully understand. Yet there you are, floating in it anyway. The ocean in Bikini Bottom never rushed the characters. It didn't pressure them to evolve. It just sat there, steady and vast, while Squidward pursued art. Patrick sat on rocks. Sandy built inventions. And SpongeBob woke up excited for another simple day. Their routines seemed small compared to the size of the sea around them. And maybe that's the point. Maybe their routines were anchors, daily reminders that even in a huge world, you could still hold on to something. You can almost picture it. The houses glowing faintly as the ocean water sways above them, shadows moving gently across the sand. Some nights, the background music sounded almost like a tide breathing in and out. The show didn't tell us what to feel, but the silence between moments often did. Kind of like thinking while walking down your street at dusk, feeling your steps sink into the sidewalk while the streetlights flicker slowly to life. But that wasn't where it ended. The ocean made everything feel both small and important at the same time. The characters didn't try to conquer it. They just learned how to live inside it. And that carries an oddly comforting truth. Maybe life doesn't need to be figured out completely. Maybe being small isn't weakness. Maybe it's just scale. People who overthink often say the ocean represents what they can't put into words. The space between questions. The part of life where answers don't arrive on schedule. When SpongeBob laughed without reason, or Squidward played his clarinet to no audience, the ocean kept moving quietly in the background, not ignoring them, just holding them, like it understood that existence doesn't always need certainty to be meaningful. You might have felt something like that before, when lying on your bed with the lights off, hearing distant cars outside, and wondering how everything can matter and not matter at the same time. There's a strange peace in that feeling, the kind that doesn't solve anything, but makes the questions gentler. Maybe that's what the ocean did for Bikini Bottom. It turned their worries into waves. It made their routines feel like rafts, small but sturdy. Some fans say the show gave them comfort because it showed a world where being small didn't mean being alone. Life beneath the sea looked vast, but community kept it warm. SpongeBob's laughter, Patrick's loyalty, Sandy's determination, Squidward's persistence, Mr. Krabs' need to protect, even Plankton's desperate chase. All of it, floating together. And that's what makes the ocean feel so human. It didn't judge them. It just gave them space to be who they were. Maybe that's why the show still matters. It didn't tell viewers how to live, but it gave them a town underwater where uncertainty didn't cancel connection, where big didn't erase small, where being lost didn't mean being alone. It didn't end there, though, because once you notice how the ocean shaped everything, you start to see Bikini Bottom differently. not as an escape, but as a map. And maybe the next part of that map leads towards something even deeper, waiting quietly beneath the surface. There were times when the streets of Bikini Bottom were completely empty. No crowd, no rush, just soft colors and quiet buildings standing still. The town felt gentler in those moments, almost like it was taking a breath. That wasn't the strange part yet. Those empty streets didn't feel lifeless. They felt like the quiet walk home after sunset, when the sky is fading from orange to blue, and you start to hear things differently. The sound of your own footsteps, the way your breathing lines up with the chill in the air. SpongeBob captured that feeling without saying a word. It let silence carry the story. You might have experienced something like that in real life, coming back from an evening out, or finishing a shift when the sky has already gone dark. Maybe the streetlights flickered on, one at a time. Maybe you passed by houses with lights peeking through curtains, each one holding its own little world. There was no rush to get anywhere, just space, just time moving slowly enough for you to notice it. But that wasn't where it ended. The empty streets of Bikini Bottom didn't feel sad. They felt available, like the world was giving you room to breathe. Sometimes, silence doesn't demand anything. It simply waits. And when life feels overwhelming, those spaces, quiet, unoccupied, unhurried, can be the safest places to land. The show seemed to understand that. There were episodes where SpongeBob would walk alone past closed shops, the sound of distant ocean waves barely audible in the background. No dialogue, just atmosphere, as if the town knew that not every moment needs to be filled. That comfort can exist, even when nothing happens at all. Some fans say those scenes helped them during difficult nights. They didn't make them happy. They made them calm. Bikini Bottom wasn't always full of energy. Sometimes it looked like a painting left out in the evening light. Still, but not abandoned. Just resting. You can almost imagine your own life layered onto that view. The hallway light glowing softly behind you. The AC kicking on every few minutes. Late-night thoughts drifting in and out without urgency. The kind of quiet where reflection doesn't feel heavy. It just floats, like bubbles rising to the surface. Those empty streets didn't ask for interpretation. They simply existed. And maybe that's what made them so powerful. Because solitude isn't always loneliness. Sometimes it's the space where your mind finally gets to breathe. A soft pause between questions. The show never tried to fill every second with action. It trusted silence. It trusted stillness. And that trust made the world feel strangely real. Almost familiar. Like when you look at your town from a distance and realize how many stories it holds. Stories continuing quietly even when no one is watching. Maybe that's why rewatching SpongeBob hits differently as time passes. Not just because of the jokes, but because of the spaces between them. The parts that let you sit, observe, and feel without needing to understand everything. The kind of moments that feel like a long exhale. It's easy to overlook those scenes as filler, but for some people, they linger the longest. They remind us that quiet doesn't have to be lonely, that emptiness doesn't always need to be filled, that stillness, when held gently, can feel like safety. It didn't end there, though. Because once you start noticing the silence in Bikini Bottom, you might start hearing the silence in your own world differently too. Not as emptiness, but as possibility, as a space where thoughts can slow down without judgment. The kind of stillness that stays with you long after the episode ends. There were episodes when SpongeBob didn't smile, and those moments always felt heavier than expected. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle. His voice lowered just a little. His eyes looked less like sunshine, and more like someone trying to remember why they used to feel it. That wasn't the strange part yet. Those scenes didn't come often, but when they did, the atmosphere changed. The colors felt dimmer. The music slowed down, almost like it was being careful not to say the wrong thing. SpongeBob never shouted his sadness. He just carried it, softly, like he didn't want to inconvenience anyone. Some people know that feeling well, the effort of staying cheerful when cheer doesn't come naturally anymore. There are days in real life when smiling feels like work, when being positive feels less like a choice and more like a responsibility, even though your heart doesn't feel ready. Maybe you've experienced that kind of day, the kind where you hold it together so well that nobody suspects anything. You make jokes, you nod along, you keep moving, but inside, something feels a little quieter than usual. But that wasn't where it ended. SpongeBob's rare, quiet moments made his character feel deeply human. He didn't always bounce back immediately. Sometimes it took a while. Sometimes he hid it. Sometimes he sat with it. And that made the idea of happiness feel more real. Not something permanent, but something that could fade and return, just like tides. A lot of viewers relate to that pattern, even if they don't say it out loud. Especially adults who feel pressure to stay upbeat no matter what. SpongeBob's silence didn't say, "I'm broken." It said something gentler. "I'm tired." And maybe that kind of honesty mattered more than any joke ever could, because it proved that even the happiest hearts get tired sometimes. There's a quiet power in admitting that joy isn't always constant. SpongeBob never gave speeches about that. He just let the silence speak for him. The world outside might be loud, the fridge humming, cars passing, notifications blinking on your phone, but those gentle moments offer a pause, not to solve things, just to rest. Sometimes he would take a walk alone, no plans, no grand adventure, just a slow step across the sand, like he was remembering how to feel okay again. In those scenes, Bikini Bottom didn't feel like a cartoon world. It felt like a place where emotions could exist without labels, where sadness didn't ruin the day. It simply passed through. Eventually, SpongeBob always found his smile again. Not perfectly, not instantly, but gradually, the way people often do in real life. Not with a switch, but with small things. A laugh from a friend, a task he enjoyed, a memory he held on to. It's the kind of recovery that doesn't need applause, just time. And that might be what made his character so quietly profound. He never pretended to be invincible. He just trusted that his optimism would return eventually. Maybe that's what hope really looks like. Not a loud voice, but a soft one that whispers, "Keep going." Those moments remind viewers that happiness isn't a performance. It's a rhythm. It rises, it falls, it rests, it returns. Watching SpongeBob stop smiling didn't make the show darker. It made the light more honest. It didn't end there, though. Because once you notice that, you begin to see something even deeper. That Bikini Bottom wasn't just a setting. It was a reflection of the hearts inside it. And sometimes, hearts need space to be quiet before they shine again. Squidward's house always faced SpongeBob's, and the more you think about it, the more intentional that window placement feels. Every morning, Squidward opened his blinds and saw a pineapple bouncing with energy, a neighbor waking up with more enthusiasm than seemed logical. SpongeBob wasn't just across the street. He was always in view. That wasn't the strange part yet. It's easy to assume Squidward hated SpongeBob, but maybe it was something quieter than that. Maybe he looked out that window and felt a kind of ache, not from annoyance, but from comparison. When your life feels stuck in routine, someone else's joy can feel louder than it really is. Not because it's too bright, but because it reminds you of the light you once had. That's what perspective does. It doesn't always change what you see. It changes how you feel while seeing it. Squidward didn't fully understand how SpongeBob could live with that much optimism. Maybe he wasn't angry at SpongeBob. Maybe he was confused, wondering how someone could wake up happy before anything good even happened. For people who feel trapped in routine, that kind of energy can seem unreal, like it doesn't belong to the same world. You might have felt something like that before, scrolling through pictures of happier people when your day wasn't going great, or watching life move around you when your own feet felt heavy. That window between Squidward and SpongeBob wasn't just glass. It was perspective. A lens highlighting the difference between two hearts living side by side. But that wasn't where it ended. SpongeBob didn't just represent joy. He represented possibility. The kind of possibility that life sometimes quiets when growing up becomes stressful. Squidward staying inside his house wasn't laziness. It was safety, a shield against disappointment. Meanwhile, SpongeBob stepped outside every morning like the world had already welcomed him, even when it hadn't said anything yet. Squidward's window almost felt like a symbolic mirror, not showing his reflection, but showing who he used to be, as if SpongeBob reminded him of a younger version of himself, one that hadn't yet felt the weight of unfulfilled dreams. That's the part that resonates with so many adults, the realization that joy once felt natural, before it started feeling optional. You can almost picture Squidward standing at that window late at night, the lights in SpongeBob's house still on, maybe laughter echoing faintly through the water, the kind of laughter that feels far away, not in distance, but in memory, the fridge humming softly, the silence of his room settling around him. That's when the ache hits hardest, not at SpongeBob, but at the feeling of disconnect between what is and what used to be. But the show never painted Squidward as hopeless. His proximity to SpongeBob might have been its own form of quiet guidance. Not loud, not direct, just a steady reminder that joy still existed nearby, even if he couldn't reach it yet. Sometimes being close to something bright isn't meant to make you happy right away. Sometimes it just keeps you from going dark completely. Maybe that was the quiet message. That being bothered by hope doesn't mean you've lost it. It might mean you still recognize it. Even when life becomes complicated, a spark of envy can mean the heart hasn't shut down. It might just be waiting for a reason to open again. It didn't end there, though. Because once you understand Squidward's window, you start to understand Bikini Bottom itself. Not as a cartoon world, but as a reflection of emotional space. And sometimes, all a heart needs is a window facing the right direction. There's a theory some fans whisper about, not written online or proven through episodes, but felt quietly in late-night thoughts. They say the ocean in SpongeBob isn't just water. It represents uncertainty, the wide space between childhood and adulthood, the part of life where you're still searching, even if you don't know for what. That wasn't the strange part yet. Every character seemed to carry something unfinished. Squidward chased recognition. Patrick chased clarity. Sandy chased belonging. Plankton chased validation. Mr. Krabs chased security. Even SpongeBob, in his own way, chased connection. Each one moved through their days with purpose, yet something soft and incomplete ran underneath all of them, like a current in the water that never stopped flowing. Some people say that's why Bikini Bottom felt so comforting. It didn't hide the ache. It held it gently. The town wasn't perfect, and it didn't pretend to be. It just kept floating, the way most of us do, even when life doesn't hand us the answers. You might have felt that before on quiet nights, when your thoughts slowed down, and you realized life doesn't always offer clarity, just moments. You take a breath, you keep going, you hope the tide doesn't pull too hard. But the ocean wasn't cruel. It was patient, calm. The show never painted it as a danger. It just existed, a backdrop for the stories people lived inside of. Maybe that's why viewers found peace there. The ocean didn't try to fix anyone. It simply allowed them to be. And sometimes, being allowed to exist without explanation feels like the kindest thing in the world. The theory of the lonely sea suggests that uncertainty isn't a flaw. It's a natural state of life. The characters never solved all their problems. They just found small joys in between them. A clarinet note, a jellyfishing trip, a good shift at work, a simple meal with a friend. Those quiet victories weren't grand, but they were real, like drifting on gentle waves without knowing where they lead, yet trusting them anyway. You can almost picture those late-night scenes again. The house is lit softly, while everything outside slows down. The fridge humming, the distant sound of ocean bubbles. Those moments resembled real life, in a way that didn't need explanation. Silence became its own dialogue. Uncertainty became part of the atmosphere. Some viewers say they relate to that feeling more as they grow older. The world gets bigger, answers get fewer. Yet somehow, the heart still beats, and the morning still arrives. Maybe that's what Bikini Bottom was quietly teaching. Uncertainty doesn't cancel life. It simply shapes it. But that wasn't where it ended. Maybe SpongeBob wasn't meant to ignore uncertainty. Maybe he was meant to live joyfully in spite of it. Not to erase the unknown, but to show that happiness can still find room in the spaces between questions. His optimism didn't conquer the sea. It coexisted with it. The ocean in SpongeBob might represent something we all carry. The fear that we're floating alone. But Bikini Bottom shows that floating isn't always isolation. Sometimes it's resilience. Sometimes it's progress. Sometimes it's simply life moving forward in its own quiet rhythm. Maybe that's why the show still comforts people who are awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, letting thoughts drift like waves across the mind. It didn't offer final answers. It offered company, and sometimes That's enough. It didn't end there, though, because if the ocean symbolizes uncertainty, and every character symbolizes a different kind of heart, then maybe Bikini Bottom was never just a cartoon town. Maybe it was a quiet map of human emotion, drawn underwater, waiting patiently to be seen. When people rewatch SpongeBob now, something unexpected happens. It doesn't just make them laugh. It reminds them of a version of themselves they didn't even notice slipping away. A version that moved slower, felt lighter, and believed joy didn't need a reason. That wasn't the strange part yet. Saturday mornings used to feel like tiny holidays. You'd wake up without an alarm, the sun warming the window, a cereal box already waiting in the kitchen. The TV would glow across the floor, not just as entertainment, but as a quiet welcome into the day. Time felt different then, less crowded, less demanding. Each minute seemed to stretch out like it wanted to stick around. After-school afternoons had a similar kind of magic. You'd come home tired, maybe drop your backpack onto the carpet, and grab something quick to eat. The house would be quiet, except for the distant murmur of cartoon music coming from the living room. Somehow that sound felt safer than words ever could. SpongeBob didn't rush you. He just sat there, already waiting. But that wasn't where it ended. Somewhere along the way, schedules replaced simplicity. Responsibilities rushed in. Weekends turned into errands, not adventures. The cereal box didn't feel as exciting. The TV glow didn't stretch across the room the way it used to. Nothing went wrong, but something quietly changed. When people rewatch SpongeBob now, it's not just nostalgia, it's recognition. A soft reminder of who they were when they didn't need permission to be happy. The show didn't change. We did. And maybe that's why it hits differently as we grow older. It's a mirror that doesn't show faces. It shows feelings. You might have felt it before, when an old theme song plays by accident, or when you catch a familiar color palette on screen. A sudden memory arrives, not clearly, but like a distant sound just loud enough to say it still exists. It doesn't explain itself. It just lingers, asking nothing from you. Those kinds of memories don't walk in. They drift. Sometimes, when nights are quiet and responsibilities fade into the background for a moment, the mind wanders back to childhood scenes, sitting cross-legged in front of the screen, hearing your parents in another room, feeling the warmth of a blanket that smelled faintly of laundry detergent. It was a time before leading a life became something complicated. Back then, simply living it was enough. But the heart remembers more than it forgets. Even now, certain details can bring everything back. The jingling sound during the title card, the squishy footsteps, or the underwater filter over every voice. It felt like the world was safe, because nothing rushed you, nothing judged you. Even the problems resolved themselves gently, without leaving scars. People don't always know how to talk about that feeling today, so they watch instead. They let Bikini Bottom speak on their behalf. It's easier to let a cartoon hold your memories than to name them out loud. And maybe that's okay. Some emotions don't need direct expression. They just need a place to live. You can almost picture the living room you once knew, the remote on the couch, your legs stretching out across the carpet, the fridge humming behind you. Those moments may be gone, but they aren't lost. They float, like bubbles, somewhere in memory. Not crystal clear, but present enough to prove they still matter. And maybe that's the quiet purpose of rewatching SpongeBob, not to relive childhood, but to feel connected to the part of yourself that never fully left. It didn't end there, though. Once memories begin to stir, they tend to lead somewhere, towards a realization waiting softly beneath the surface. And maybe that's where Bikini Bottom starts to feel like more than just a town. Maybe SpongeBob wasn't about underwater creatures at all. Maybe it was a quiet lesson in how to care, even when nobody asks you to. He never waited for the perfect moment or for the right words. He just showed up, whether it made sense or not. That wasn't the strange part yet. What's easy to miss is how natural his kindness was. SpongeBob didn't rehearse empathy. He didn't earn it or try to make it impressive. It was woven into him, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He offered help before people admitted they needed it. He listened even when the story didn't make sense. He believed in people long after they had stopped believing in themselves. Some might call that foolish, but some might call it quietly brave. Many viewers don't remember every episode, but they remember how the show made their chest feel lighter. They remember how Bikini Bottom felt calm, even when the characters were arguing. They remember the care that filled the silence between the jokes. SpongeBob didn't try to solve every problem. Sometimes he just stayed close. And strangely enough, that was often enough. You might have known someone like that in real life. A friend who checked in when nobody else noticed your silence. A relative who remembered something small you said months ago. Maybe someone who didn't say much, but made you feel safe just by being there. Not to rescue, just to remind you that you still mattered. That simple presence can feel like a kind of gift, even when it arrives quietly. But that wasn't where it ended. SpongeBob showed that you don't need a big reason to care. Sometimes kindness doesn't come from logic. It comes from instinct. He didn't calculate whether someone deserved help. He just chose to care first and understand later. In a world that often asks for explanations, that kind of instinctive kindness can feel almost radical. As adults, people often learn to hide tenderness behind jokes or distractions. Being openly kind can feel risky, like it might be misunderstood or taken advantage of. But SpongeBob never hesitated. His heart was loud without being noisy. He didn't make speeches. He just lived in a way that made things feel a little less heavy. Some viewers say rewatching the show reminds them of the simplicity of goodness. The kind you don't brag about. The kind that doesn't need to be rewarded. The kind that exists simply because hearts are capable of growing bigger instead of harder. When life gets complicated, that kind of goodness can feel distant, but not gone. Think of those quiet scenes when SpongeBob helped Squidward even after being rejected, or encouraged Patrick even when Patrick didn't understand the situation, or celebrated Sandy's achievements without needing any recognition himself. His kindness didn't ask to be witnessed. It just asked to be shared. And maybe that's the real lesson. That kindness doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to exist. A small moment, a gentle gesture, a few sincere words can make the day easier for someone else. You can almost hear those faint ukulele chords from the show, as if they're reminding us that compassion doesn't need permission. It just needs heart. Maybe that's why SpongeBob's optimism never grew old. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. It simply reminded viewers that kindness still has a place in the world. Even now. Even when days get heavy. Even when nobody talks about it. It didn't end there, though. Because if SpongeBob showed us how to care, then maybe the entire town was built to show what happens when connection keeps people going. And maybe understanding that brings us one step closer to what Bikini Bottom truly was all along. What's easy to miss when watching SpongeBob is how much the characters actually depended on each other. Not in loud, dramatic ways, but in quiet ones. Their connections weren't always loving, but they were meaningful. Each heart in Bikini Bottom helped the others keep beating. That wasn't the strange part yet. Squidward needed SpongeBob, even if he never said it out loud. SpongeBob's hope gave his routine meaning. Without that daily spark across the window, his mornings might have felt even heavier. Patrick needed someone who understood his confusion. SpongeBob didn't just listen, he accepted him. That kind of acceptance is rare, and it mattered more than words could say. Even Mr. Krabs needed someone like SpongeBob to remind him that work didn't have to be empty. Every shift at the Krusty Krab was more than money. It was proof that connection could live inside routine. And Plankton, he needed a rival, someone to chase, someone to challenge. That rivalry gave his life shape, even when it failed. Without the chase, he might have faded into silence. SpongeBob didn't try to fix him, but in some strange way, he helped him keep going, just by being there. You might have noticed this in your own life. People who crossed your path not to solve your problems, but to give your days a rhythm. A friend who always called at the right time. A coworker who made slow mornings easier. A neighbor who waved hello every evening, even if you barely knew their name. They didn't change everything, but they kept everything moving. That kind of presence can mean more than advice ever could. But that wasn't where it ended. Bikini Bottom wasn't just a cartoon town. It was a community stitched together by small gestures and incomplete people. The show never tried to explain this. It just let the connections exist, quietly, episode after episode. A slow reminder that even flawed hearts can help each other survive the day. Sometimes, friendships don't disappear. They just change shape. They drift. They soften. They grow quieter. But they don't always end. The characters in Bikini Bottom might not have been the perfect friends, but they were consistent. They showed up, even when they didn't fully understand each other, and sometimes showing up is what counts. You can almost imagine Bikini Bottom at dawn, the light stretching across the water, the streets still empty, each character waking up with their own worries, yet sharing the same town, the same air, the same ocean above them. Their lives didn't touch loudly, but they overlapped, and maybe that's what made their world feel real. Some viewers say Bikini Bottom taught them that people don't need to be perfect to matter. A community doesn't have to be flawless. It just has to exist. The idea that hearts can stay connected, even when words fail, is something the show quietly carried from episode to episode. A reminder that company doesn't need to be perfect to feel like home. The characters might not have fixed each other, but they helped each other keep moving. Squidward kept painting. Patrick kept searching. Mr. Krabs kept protecting. Plankton kept trying. SpongeBob kept caring. And together, even without knowing it, they formed something strong. something that made the ocean feel less lonely. It didn't end there, though, because once you notice how the town held itself together, you begin to realize Bikini Bottom might not have been random at all. It might have been a gentle mirror, showing that even the smallest community can carry the biggest feelings. And maybe that was the message quietly floating underneath it all. The theory isn't that SpongeBob is the main character. It isn't that Bikini Bottom is real, or even that every episode holds a secret code. It's quieter than all that. The real theory is that every character represents a part of the human heart. Hope, fear, ambition, doubt, joy, loneliness. And SpongeBob was simply the light that showed how those feelings could exist together, without shame. That wasn't the strange part yet. When people rewatch the show as adults, it sometimes feels like they're revisiting their own emotions. Squidward's quiet frustration, Patrick's confusion, Sandy's longing, Mr. Krabs' fear, Plankton's desperation, Gary's silence. They didn't act the same, and they didn't always understand one another, but together, they made Bikini Bottom feel whole. Maybe that's what humans do too, carry different emotions that don't always agree, yet still make up one person. SpongeBob didn't try to fix anyone. He just lived in a way that made their weight easier to carry. He reminded Squidward that existence still had color. He reminded Patrick that confusion didn't cancel love. He reminded Sandy that strength could still be tender. He reminded Mr. Krabs that protection didn't have to become fear. And he reminded Plankton that effort, even when unseen, still mattered. But that wasn't where it ended. The theory is that Bikini Bottom wasn't a random town. It was a map of feelings living side by side. Maybe that's why the ocean stayed quiet. Maybe it didn't represent mystery alone. Maybe it represented everything people don't yet understand about themselves. Not danger, but depth. The kind of depth you only notice when the room grows dark and thoughts begin to drift more slowly. Sometimes people watch SpongeBob late at night, not because they're seeking answers, but because they're seeking company. A soft reminder that feelings don't always need solving. They just need room to breathe. And maybe seeing all those emotions coexisting under the sea, messy, imperfect, and still moving, helped people believe that their own hearts could keep going too. Think about it. Hope didn't erase doubt. Ambition didn't erase fear. Joy didn't erase loneliness. All of them lived together. All of them had a place. And SpongeBob, rather than fighting them, simply accepted them. Maybe that's what true optimism is. Not pretending everything is fine, but believing feelings can exist together without breaking you. You might have felt that while lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing distant cars roll by like fading thoughts. The room is quiet. The hallway light glows faintly. Your heart feels full, but unexplainable. And suddenly, a show you watched as a kid feels less like a cartoon and more like a conversation you didn't know was happening. Maybe that's why Bikini Bottom always kept going. Not because everything made sense, but because everything was allowed to be felt. Every character had space. Every feeling had a voice. Nothing was perfect, yet everything continued. Just like people. Just like hearts. That's the theory nobody talks about, because it isn't built to be proven. It's built to be felt. SpongeBob wasn't trying to save his town. He was just showing it how to live. Not flawlessly, not logically, but openly. And maybe that's what the show was whispering all along. You don't have to solve every feeling to deserve peace. Some emotions simply need sunlight. Others need patience. And all of them need room to breathe. It didn't end there, though. One final thought still lingers. One last echo beneath the waves. Something gentle, something human, something that might explain why Bikini Bottom still lives in so many hearts after all these years. As the journey begins to fade, picture the ocean again. Silent, steady, endless. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand anything. It just exists, moving at its own rhythm. Maybe that's why SpongeBob always felt comforting. The world above might have been noisy, but underwater, things slowed down just enough to breathe. That wasn't the strange part yet. The ocean in SpongeBob wasn't loud. It wasn't a mystery to solve or an enemy to defeat. It was simply there, like a heartbeat we forgot we had. And maybe that's what people needed all along. Not a cartoon to distract them, but a quiet place to rest their thoughts. Somewhere between the laughter, the music, and the silence, Bikini Bottom reminded us that life doesn't always need answers right away. Sometimes it just needs moments of honesty. You might have felt that on nights when sleep wouldn't come easily, when your thoughts moved like waves, drifting further than you planned. The glow of the screen lighting up your room, the soft hum of appliances keeping you company. Maybe you replayed old memories, not clearly, but in fragments. A smell, a laugh, a color, the kind of memories that don't return fully, but just enough to remind you they once existed. But that wasn't where it ended. As adults, people tend to search for meaning in big ideas. Yet SpongeBob taught something softer. That meaning can live quietly in small moments. A job done with care. A friend who listens. A laugh after a long day. A pet waiting at home. SpongeBob didn't chase purpose. He created it by being present. Maybe that's why the town felt real. Even though it was drawn with simple lines and bright colors. It didn't try to solve loneliness. It floated with it. It didn't erase fear. It held it gently. It didn't cure confusion. It let it exist without judgment. And maybe that's how hearts work too. Maybe feelings don't need fixing. Maybe they just need room to breathe. So what if Bikini Bottom was never just under the sea? What if it was always inside us? The place where our feelings live together, trying to figure things out? Hope has a house there. So does fear. So does confusion. So does laughter. Each one might look different, speak differently, or wake up at a different time, but they all share the same ocean. You can picture it now, maybe. The houses glowing softly beneath the waves. The streets empty but peaceful. The sky above turning dark shades of blue. Somewhere in that stillness, the water keeps moving, patiently carrying everything forward, even when nothing seems to change. And maybe that's the message the show was quietly whispering all along, that you don't need perfect answers to feel okay, that you don't need to be certain to move forward. Sometimes it's enough just to float, to breathe, to notice that your heart is still beating, even when you're not sure how. Maybe the ocean is inside us too, not as a mystery to fear, but a space. Space for memories. Space for feelings. Space to rest when the world feels heavy. And maybe, when you finally close your eyes tonight, the waves will carry them gently. Maybe we'll never find every lost episode, but maybe we don't need to. Some memories weren't meant to be proven, only remembered. If tonight felt calm, even just a little, then that's enough. Sleep well. Dream softly. Good night.